Well, I think the biggest surprise is that there's been many different ways of thinking about development, and there's really no kind of orthodoxy or consensus on what it means. There have been repeated attempts to impose a particular vision, but by and large, the only agreement is that there are many different dimensions to it. I think the second aspect of it that's important is that development practitioners have really been taken over, in a sense, by economists. That's not really a surprise. But one result is that various other issues, development as health, development as happiness, development as security, tend to push really hard or struggle really hard to get onto the agenda, and that's a bit of a challenge. And finally, what is perhaps surprising is that, and maybe this is a critical observation about development practitioners as well as theorists, is that they tend to ignore the really complex sociocultural context of many places in which they work. That often means they sort of suspend politics as somehow irrelevant or external to the whole process because they're focused on very technical or precise things. And I can understand some of that when people come out of a background and have a bunch of implicit assumptions about how the world works, but in parts of rural Asia, Africa, urban cities, in emerging countries, you really do have to stop and think, gee, this is not Kansas. Well, given that I think there's many different ways of thinking about development, you can always find somebody who's pointing a flashlight at a particular issue. But it's certainly the case that much of the sort of recent fads and trends, I would point to two in particular. One is the focus on the Millennium Development Goals as the sort of be-all and end-all of achieving development. And the second is the focus on poverty reduction. That they create a kind of momentum where the train of poverty reduction goes down the track. And that tends, over time, to create increasing gaps where there are contexts that get neglected, issues that are seen as somehow less relevant, and they then emerge back on the agenda, whether it's what to do in a post-conflict or fragile context, or how to deal with high growth but high inequality, etc. So I think that's really important, that these gaps be recognized, that when you go down a policy track, you create them. On the Millennium Development Goals issue, I think the community is increasingly recognizing that a focus on 8 goals and a larger basket of indicators has really imposed a little bit of tunnel vision, because they were supposed to be symbols for, or exemplars of, or even proxies for some broader processes of change. But the goal became the end in itself, and I think that that's a bit of a danger, and we need to kind of do a reset on the MDGs. I think I would have to say inequality will be one of them, because one of the lessons of the past couple decades is that poverty alleviation, or even growth in general, is often, not always, but often accompanied with rising inequality in both developed and developing contexts. And the second might be, and this is where I would challenge a few of the people here in the meeting, it may be true that growth is still the mantra, but I think growth is actually no longer the model. And we should start looking to countries that have implicitly adopted a different vision. People talk about 10 or 20 years of a lost decade in Japan, but Japan's a reasonably happy place. The people are as well off as they were 20 years ago. It may be slipping in the global league tables, but this is a cohesive society that's getting certain things right. Might be true about Italy too, which everybody complains is having low growth, although high debt. But the growth model, while it may have a lot of political pressure behind it, I don't think is sustainable, not just environmentally, but economically. We've had a 50 or 70 or even 100-year period when growth was the new normal. And I just don't think that's going to be what we're going to see in the next 50 years. So how we deal with that without creating massive social tension, conflict, and violence, which is my own interest, how we deal with that is going to be a big challenge.